Good morning, everybody. My name is Tim Duhamel. I am the president of Bloom Center for Municipal Education, and I'm very, very excited and pleased to be here with you today to present a webinar on one of my favorite subjects, municipal strategic planning for elected officials. Wondering why this is one of my favorite subjects? I have learned over my almost 30 years now in municipal government, basically how important strategic planning is to the success of municipalities. I've seen many municipalities over my career succeed in many aspects, whether it be building up their economy, whether it be attracting new development from a residential perspective, new fire halls, new recreation facilities. The list goes on and on. And I will say this, that in my experience, municipalities that are very good at the strategic planning exercise and the process, something going to be talking about here shortly, is the process of strategic planning, are the ones that typically flourish. They're the ones that typically succeed. They're the ones that you, when you drive into town or into the region, you see growth, you see vibrance, you see success. Normally, municipalities that succeed are very, very good and deliberate about their strategic planning. No different than in our personal lives, no different than in our relationships, no different than in our careers. Basically, success doesn't happen by accident. And so, basically, taking a deliberate approach to success, what you want to be when you grow up, basically, as a municipality, is in my mind one of the most important exercises that any municipality can go through. And so, that's why I wanted to put today's material together. So, moving on, most of you know me already, but I think we might have a few new people online, so I'll just do a very quick spiel. My name is Tim Duhamel, president of Bloom, was a municipal employee for many years, been a CAO 3 times, general manager of community practice services for the city of Spruce Grove. So one of the things I'm very proud of is I often just say, I'm just one of you. So unlike many, different consultants, I've actually been in the seat. I've actually been through the challenges. I've worked with councils. I've worked, with staff. I've dealt with silo challenges and things like that from a municipal perspective. And so I like to say I'm just one of you, and I really like to share my stories and my experiences while I'm doing my webinars. And I'm really hoping you enjoy today. So moving along. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to go over 4 key phases or 4 key components of strategic planning. I'm going to talk about basically the basics, depending on where you are in your strategic planning world or your knowledge. I'm going to talk to you about what is strategic planning exactly? What are the definitions? Why do we do it? And why is it important for municipal government? And I just want to say, one thing on this topic. I worked in municipal government for probably, well, I'd say it was probably 3 to 4 years at least, working in the finance and the budget office in Strathcona County before I started to really understand what a strategic plan was and why it provided value. And probably most importantly, for the finance people that might be online today, is how strategic planning actually should affect my work. How I should treat my processes that are reactionary to strategic planning, because in the end, hint, hint, a really big takeaway from today's webinar, strategic planning doesn't provide any value at all unless it comes off the shelf and becomes reality. So basically, actioned resources attached to strategic initiatives, staffing, whatever it might be, and we see, for lack of a better way of putting it, we see the rubber hit the road. And so strategic planning, in my mind, what success looks like is when it results in actual tangible action and actual tangible results. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We're going to talk about strategic planning in the municipal context, because municipalities are very different than private business. And so I want to make sure I really focus on the municipal world as we talk about strategic planning. Um, and then I'm going to go through, I think, a very important component, the process steps. And so if you're out there right now and you're new to strategic planning, or it's something that you'd like to maybe think about from your municipality's perspective, I've got basically the steps that I take municipalities through when I facilitate strategic plans. This is something, and again, maybe I'm taking work away from myself, but all kidding aside, um, it is something that a municipality can do on their own. It is something that a council can actually accomplish on their own as long as they take the time to learn. And whoever's on this webinar today is taking the time to learn. As long as you take the time to learn, you commit to the process, and you commit to the hard work that needs to be done in relationship to making a strat plan successful. That said, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, because sometimes there's a lot of good consultants out there, me being one of them, that can help facilitate you through that. And there's all kinds of different budgets we have for strategic planning, dependent on your current situation. But strategic planning and the process steps, I'm going to go through them with you today, so you will have a very strong understanding of the things that you need to do to get basically a working strategic plan that can actually make a difference in your municipality. Finally, I'm going to go over some examples, and actually, I'm going to go over one really key example. I've done literally dozens of strategic plans and facilitated processes with municipalities over the last 8 years since it started Bloom. But I have one in particular that I'm going to show you an example of, and it's basically a template for strategic plans that I've done with many municipalities. One of the things I'm excited about showing you today is I'm going to show you the linkage of a strategic plan, and then how do you get off the bookshelf and make it happen. I'm going to show you an action plan that I actually worked on with the municipality, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the long-term financial plan. Um, Strategic planning doesn't really work unless you develop the actions, and you can, through budget, put financial resources and attach them to initiatives related to strategic planning that make things happen. Otherwise, again, you have nothing more than what I would consider a shiny bookshelf item. So again, lots of content today, so stay tuned. Um, so again, strategic planning definitions and purpose. And this is a slide I put in a lot of my presentations. I just delivered a leadership course in the city of Saskatoon. RMF Corwin Park, by the way, was the host, and I really am thankful to them. It turned out really well, and I really enjoyed the experience. But this is a slide that's applicable to many different subjects: leadership, management, organizational culture, and definitely strategic planning. So when we're looking at strategic planning, we want to make sure that we're focusing on becoming a high performance municipality. And so when you're considering the elements of strategy, you have to consider two key streams that make municipalities successful. The first one is positive culture. And by positive culture, especially when it comes to the strategic planning process, we're probably talking about the culture of council. Councils that work well together typically succeed together. Councils that have this strong ability to agree to disagree and use a healthy democratic process and governance to get to decisions and then move on and take action and put things behind them are the ones that, in my mind, are truly the ones that succeed well. So this is absolutely critical to the strategic planning process. If you are a council that is divided, or a council that can't agree on things, or can't let things go and basically cherish and respect the governance process from a decision-making perspective, the chances of a strategic plan being a very, very strong and useful process for you and document is probably going to go down significantly. And so I can't stress enough, as councils and as administrators, as you start looking at the strategic plan process itself and you say, okay, we're going to commit to doing this, you probably want to start that off with a bit of a discussion around what's our willingness and our appetite to work together as council. What's our appetite and willingness to learn and understand each other's perspectives? What's our appetite to maybe accept something that I think is important, maybe doesn't make the cut in relationship to council on the whole from a democratic process? And if I'm willing to kind of check off those check boxes, I'm probably going to do pretty good from a strategic planning process perspective. Part of the reason why, again, for that cultural perspective, is the strategic planning process can result in a bit of debate during the facilitation process, because not everybody sees their community through the same lens and or sees the same basically value or value proposition for their residents. And because of that, sometimes strategic planning can result in a bit of debate and discussion, which is fantastic. That's the whole point of municipalities, and the whole point of great governance is different perspectives coming forward. But you must find ways to get to consensus in your strategic planning process. The second part, obviously, is process. And I've again mentioned that already. The key thing, again, we tie culture and then we tie process, is strategic planning must be looked at not as a weekend workshop or basically the goal of creating some nice shiny document. The goal of good strategic planning is identifying it and integrating it into process. And basically, once you have done the work to develop a strategic plan, maybe have some strategic priority focus areas and goals and objectives, it's not enough. You then have to start talking about, as administration, what's our process reaction going to be to council strategic plan. I believe that the majority, or at least a lot of frustration that occurs between councils and administrations, is primarily because our administrations don't act on their goals, their priorities, their vision for the community. And then councils kind of step back and go, well, they're not listening to us, or the things that we want to get done aren't getting completed. And then frustration starts to percolate, and possibly dysfunction starts to occur. And so administration has to commit to the process of strategic planning post strategic plan completion, and absolutely critical. And I'm going to talk about that and what that looks like in kind of practical terms a little bit later in the webinar. But again, once you have a commitment to great process from a strategic plan perspective and a great commitment to culture from a strategic plan perspective, that usually results in a higher performing municipality in the long term. Again, I already talked about this, so I won't go over this at length, but the key, again, to great strategic planning is recognizing that it is democracy. And so as you're going through strategic planning processes and you're determining what your priorities are and your goals, you're not all going to agree. There's no doubt that there's going to be some um, challenge when you're going through these sessions. The key commitment, again, which is again to me the foundation of great governance, is recognizing that we are here for the community on the whole, and that means that we are here for. Sorry, my cat came walking in. I usually close my door. Forgot to close my door. My cat just came in. So if you heard a meow, I apologize. Um, one of the really big keys here is that just like great governance, we have to accept basically the decision-making process and the governance process, which is democracy, which means a good facilitator will normally through a strategic planning process will open the conversations up to a bit of debate and discussion. What's important, what's not important, what does the residents on the whole want, and how are we going to get to conclusions as to what actually goes in the plan and what doesn't go in the plan. And there, you have to work through developing consensus. You have to work on committing to collaboration during the strategic planning session, and ultimately, there's a bit of give and take in a strategic planning session when you're working as council. The best strategic plans are pretty focused as well. You can't do everything. And so there's going to be some things that don't make the cut in a strategic plan as well. And you have to use the democratic process to understand that and to get to a good place. Okay. Um, Strategic planning history. Again, this is a takeaway slide. I sent everybody the PDF today. It took me forever to put this together, and I did this years ago. But in the end, strategy basically has evolved over time, and I think that's the most important part of a slide like this. Is that basically strategy began with war. It's kind of like the evolution and the origins of the notion of strategy, and over time, it really began to evolve into basically academia, where I can still remember this book, Michael Porter's book on competition, basically, which tied to strategy. I thought it was a really great book, and but the key thing here when you're thinking about strategy is basically when we look at the evolution of strategy and why we want to consider becoming strategic as a municipality, is because people, companies, organizations, and certainly municipalities that are strategic in their activities typically end up succeeding because they determine where they want to be, and that's what being an elected official is all about, is the vision. Where do we want to be? And then they have good processes to kind of fill the gaps in between to take action to get to that vision eventually. And so absolutely, the understanding of fundamentals of strategy in my mind is absolutely key to success in today's world for municipal government. It's a best practice. Again, it's a comprehensive process. Obviously, it's systematic. And one of the key things is it assesses your current environment. So you want to make sure when you're considering great strategic planning that you're considering the current state of your municipality. I have basically a SWOT analysis framework that I'm going to show you later that's specific to municipalities that will help you. But every good strategic planning process, in my mind, should start with the what is our current state? What's our current challenges from a population perspective or a growth perspective or infrastructure or economy? What are the kinds of things that we're currently challenged with? And what are current opportunities as well? And so you want to spend at least a couple, 3 hours discussing that as a council to kind of flush out where do we stand today. The problem if you don't do that is sometimes I've seen this where some facilitated council strategy sessions take us to the end and develop the vision, but can't actually be enabled because they forgot that maybe they don't have the financial capacity to reach their goals, or maybe they don't have the knowledge base with staff internally, or maybe the council's a bit divided. And so the chances of actually achieving some of these goals aren't going to occur. And so you want to assess these things while you're actually developing your strategic plan. Absolutely critical. You want to anticipate and respond appropriately to changes in the environment, envision the future, increase your effectiveness, and develop a commitment to the organized mission, and basically have some consensus on strategies. And so, again, really great strategic planning assesses our current state, as I mentioned, envisions the future, and helps us become more effective as a municipality. It also helps us identify what's priority. What should we be doing? What should we not be doing? It helps us allocate financial resources during budget. And the thing that I really think is critical about great strategic planning is it helps with decision making. If your strategic plan becomes a bookshelf item and it's not out in front of you at all times as you're starting to make decisions as council, as you're providing direction to administration, and as administration, when you're starting to develop your recommendations and your evidence for council for making decisions, if you're not considering your strategic plan, you're not focused and you're going off into basically areas where it may not provide value and the value that council ultimately has deemed as important for a community. And so the strategic plan is, again, it's a vision about where we're going to be, but it's also a guide from a process perspective, and it must be used and become part of your process DNA, for lack of a better way of putting it. And so very important from that perspective. Um, for public organizations, again, um, it's been realized now with the many challenges that municipalities face in today's world. It's getting more complex. It's getting far more difficult. We are really faced with things that, many years ago wasn't necessarily as big a concern. We have massive issues with environmental sustainability issues with, global warming and fires and floods, which happen more often. We have aging infrastructure, which is becoming a challenge. We have inflationary challenges, which has become a huge issue. It's one of the greatest financial challenges for municipalities is inflation. Whatever we do today is going to cost us a lot more tomorrow and in the future years. And so anticipating and being able to have a connection with our taxpayers in relationship to, tax increases that can compensate for inflation is the absolute core of sustainability in today's world. So long story short, we have some serious issues from a municipal perspective, and to overcome them, and not just overcome them and survive, but to actually flourish and have massive success, strategy must be employed because we have to start thinking about the challenges and how we're going to overcome them, and we have to start taking action. So really critical in my mind. Again, changing circumstances occur. You know, I I can remember when I was a budget guy and we would finish off, say, for example, our capital budget or our budget document, and like literally within a week, there would be some request for change or something. The circumstances have changed. Fuel prices went up or went down. Labor issues maybe propped up, whatever it might be. I was always frustrated as a financial officer. As I grew in my career and eventually I became a CEO and a GM, an executive level position, I started to realize that the nature of municipal government has changed. Is what we deal with all the time. Nothing changes more than municipalities. We have changes on council and election. We have changes in staff with maybe changes in chief administrative officers. We have changes in our environment. We have changes in political shifts, social issues. We are definitely change agents when we're working in municipalities. And again, strategic planning is a key component of supporting and getting us through change in a reasonable and effective manner. Again, change management is one of the key components of great strategic planning and certainly one of the keys for us to succeed as municipalities. So again, what does it involve? So now we're going to get into some of the meat of what a strategic plan is. So again, basically it involves setting goals, determining actions, and mobilizing resources. Now, I want to just say this. If there's one slide or one bullet that you really want to kind of burn into your mind, maybe write a note down, this says actually quite a bit. Great strategic planning is about determining what we want to be when we grow up in the future as a municipality. But it's also about determining actions and mobilizing resources through your budget process. So if you do not take your strat plan and link it into narrative around what kind of actions are we going to take? Are we going to develop a tax strategy? Are we going to look at building a new trail in town for community wellness? Are we going to look at some kind of business attraction strategy to help us with our economic moment? If you don't have actions attached and then ultimately financial resources attached that can help support and enable those actions, then a strat plan is really nothing more than a really nice shiny bookshelf item. And so this, to me, those three key things is determining what the vision is going to be and what our goals are. Um, what actions do we need to take, and then how are we going to pay for things is the big three in relationship to success for good strategic planning. When I facilitate strategic planning processes with municipalities, I'm very, very disciplined in making sure I ground council in the reality of the things that they're asking for. And because of my experience as a former budget guy and doing a lot of strat plans, also what types of actions do they need to take and how to integrate into the budget process. So I think it's very important. Again, um, the strategic plan is basically an organization's process for defining a strategy and direction. It really guides good decision making. I think this is really key as well. And again, guides those allocation of resources, which I talked about. One of the things I think is really key and important, and again, this is what took me a few years to understand when I was first starting in the budget office in Strathcona County, where I first started my municipal career. One of the things that I didn't really understand well was how a strategic plan integrated into the budget process that I was heavily involved in. And what I learned later in my career is that as we're developing strategic plans, we have to ask ourselves, how does this budget react and enable the strategic plan of council? I have never really met an elected official who said, I'm running on the premise of I don't want to change anything. So the key thing we have to recognize as administrators is that there's a strong expectation that we're going to take action on the things that they want to do for our community. And I'll just maybe give you a bit of motivation. That is the beauty of municipal government, is that in our careers over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, we get to see improvements and change in relationship to the quality of life of the people that live in our communities because of the vision of council. And so, as administrators, if we really embrace that notion and through strong budgeting processes, through strong researching processes on activities or projects or service level increases, where it might be, we can improve the world that we live in. And what's more important than that, right? Taking care of our neighbors and understanding that importance. I'm going to give you a bit of an example. When I was a kid, a spray park was, and I can remember throwing the towel over my shoulder and waiting at the window when I was a young little guy. I was waiting for the fire truck to drive down the street because once a summer they would come and they'd open up the fire hydrant and all the kids could go running through that. That was a spray park when I was a young guy. Look at today what we have. Again, municipalities evolve. A skate park was the stairs and the bar at the school for skateboarding. I didn't get to play on indoor ice until I was 10 because when I was a young boy, there wasn't enough arena capacity. So we actually played organized hockey against other teams on outdoor ice. It was actually kind of fun back in the day, but pretty cool for the parents as they were watching the games. But again, I think the key thing I'm trying to say here is that municipalities evolve and they evolve because of the elected officials. And the strategic planning process has to have the utmost respect for exactly that. It has to have respect for our elected officials. And we have to basically, as administrations, be always working at enabling the strategic plan and working towards meeting their goals. Because again, that's what makes our communities special. So that's strategic planning defined. There's a really quick thing here. And again, strategic planning helps with our personal lives. It helps with our business lives. If we have business, it helps with government, which we are talking about today, basically municipal service sustainability, efficiency, and it actually, and this is where it needs to be taken a step further, good strategic planning after it's completed by council and administration, it then can help departments with their business plans and strategic plans. If I'm working in public works, or if I'm working in economic development, or if I'm working in the recreation department, one of the things that I'm going to want to look at is a good strategic plan that enables me to help support council's strategic plan, but also a strategic plan that helps me from a departmental level to succeed. Good strategy can help me retain staff. It can help me with service level enhancements. It can help me overcome problems before they begin by being proactive. Having a strategic approach to work is really key to success, in my opinion. So something that you want to consider as we're going through the material. Moving along. So, what's the most important part of the strategic plan? It is basically the vision. And I always love this analogy of Tiger Woods when he used to sit over a golf ball. I took up golf again this year. My son started golfing, which I was so happy about. I've been trying to get him to golf since he was about this high, and now he's about this high. And he finally took it up this year, and we spent a lot of time golfing. So I'm going to use a golf analogy. Um, Tiger Woods used to say that when he stood over the ball and he's ready to hit it, he didn't really see the ball in front of him. What he saw was basically the ball on the green, and so he was visioning towards the future of what he wanted to actually achieve. And I think that's a really good analogy for municipal strategic planning because when you're facilitating and thinking about a really strong and good strategic planning process, one of the keys that you want to consider is it's all about what are we going to do when we grow up? Is it going to be more economy? Are we going to be a more respectful community? Are we going to have better recreation and wellness? Are we going to be a safer community, more financially sustainable? You want to make sure you kind of identify what's that vision and what do we want to see in our future? What do the citizens value is another big part of the strategic planning process. Um, you want to make sure in a good strategic plan process, you consider the connection to your residents. You want to make sure that the strategic planning is all about what do the people that we represent as council, what do they want? What does quality of life look like for them? Having a community beautification project, maybe wellness is attached to looking around and seeing a well-kept community. Maybe it's having strong hockey programs for the kids because I was a hockey dad, and so I used to love watching my kid in cold hockey rinks all across Alberta. So what are the things that we deem as important, and what does that look like? I sat in what was called an annual general meeting, and this was about the year 1999, maybe 2000. Yes, I'm pretty old. I know what you're all thinking right now. He looks way too young to have started his career in 1999. I'm kidding, of course, but um, I can remember sitting in what was called the annual general meeting. And it was this big auditorium, but holds maybe 400 or 500 people. I think it's called Festival Place. And I can remember sitting there, and the chief administrative officer, Bill Sutherland, who, by the way, was probably the most kind and thoughtful and strategic leader I've ever worked with. He had one of those projectors that project on the wall when you write them. You remember those old ones our teachers used to have with the kind of see-through paper that would go down. Anyway, he was writing on this projector and he had a big projector on the screen and he wrote things like economic development. He wrote down recreation. He wrote down infrastructure. He wrote down business attraction. He wrote down being an employer of choice. And I had no clue what this was at the time. What I didn't know is that he was outlining the priority focus areas that he had worked on with council. When he was done writing down 5 or 6 things, and this was in 1999, he then said, I would like the leaders of our community to stand up. And in the front row, 9 individuals stood up and they turned around and they waved at us. And that was council. That was the mayor and council. And what Bill was doing at that time, I thought at least anyways, is he was connecting the strategic plan to the leaders of our organization, which ultimately is council, and connecting us as staff and motivating us to kind of march towards these goals that the council had for us. Long story short, about 20, 30 years later, Strathcona County is a mecca for business. It's a very safe community. It's got great public transit, double-decker buses. It's very strong financially. It's probably a great example of success, and I 100% put that success and probably say that the reason for the success was that day when Bill probably had a workshop with council and defined where our goals and kind of our priorities were. And that is something that today I still think they march towards in terms of the strategic plan. So again, there's an example of how it actually works and how it can actually bear fruit. So something to consider. This is a slide I put up in my strategic planning sessions, and I think it's important for again a council is one you want to identify your corporate values because again it is a leadership document. We want to set the tone for how we work together, how we treat each other, how we work together. And so there's some examples of values that I put down for councils. But from a strategic planning perspective, the more important component, at least for the process perspective, is basically here's some example priority focus areas that I talk with council on. And I normally put council into 2 groups and I say, okay, pick maybe your top 5 or 6 after we've had, by the way, probably a good day of conversation before we get to this point, or at least half a day. And I often talk to them about, okay, now pick your 5 or 6 key priority theme areas. What are the key things that you think are important for us to achieve in the short and the long term for the municipality? And it might be, again, financial sustainability, economic development, service excellence is one that I really like. I'll explain why in a few moments. Connected communities, better communication with our public, whatever it might be. These are basically the things that I deem as, the top 20 or whatever I may have on here in relationship to priority themes. You don't want any more than probably 5, maybe 6 tops, because if you try to do everything, you don't do anything well, right? And again, a strategic plan can evolve. So maybe priority focus areas, maybe in 5 years or 10 years might change in terms of what we're trying to achieve. But I would say 5 or 6 of these is very important. And then sometimes some of the other ones can fit under subsets of your priority themes. And so this is basically the beginning of really good strategic planning, is identifying what are our priority focus areas. Okay. Now, once we've identified those priority focus areas, we're going to set some goals. And so we're going to have some maybe more detailed, more granular objectives that go under the priority focus areas. And then remember, as I mentioned before, we'll then talk about determining actions and allocating resources, which is the budget process. The reason why this slide in particular is important is that we want to identify council's priority areas. We want to identify their objectives. But if it goes nowhere, then it's basically a soul sapping exercise, and one that will frustrate council more than please them. And again, our job as administrators is to make council successful. So absolutely key to a great strategic planning process is identifying your priority focus areas, identifying your goals, and then the other side of the coin, which is the administrative reaction, is then determining actions and through the budget process, allocating resources. And I'm going to show you later, I actually have two documents for each side. So I have a document that is the strategic plan, and then we have basically an action plan, which is administration's reaction to the strategic plan after the strategic plan is set. And I always say to municipalities that I work with on strategic planning, basically your action plan should come forward maybe uh basically 8 weeks to 12 weeks after the strat plan's complete. Administration should be reacting with basically an action plan of some type. With, I mean, here's basically an explanation of what the action is going to be. Here's the date. Here's the who's responsible, and here's the price, so that we can give council a bit of an idea of the cost of some of the objectives and some of the goals that they have from the strategic plan process. I can't stress this part enough. If you're not willing to invest as a council in actions, basically staff, projects, maybe new capital assets, whatever it might be, to support the strategic plan, you're almost better off not doing a strat plan, because what will happen is you'll set an expectation of council. If you make it a public document, which they always are, you'll set some expectations and get maybe your public excited about some of the things that you're identifying in your strat plan. But if you're not willing to take it forward in terms of a process perspective, in terms of resources, then it's just simply, again, dreams and ideas that really will go nowhere, and that can be very discouraging. And so you have to commit to the entire process for strategic planning to be successful, in my opinion. Love to hear your thoughts on that. If you don't agree, I'd love to hear it. If you do agree, I'd love to hear that too. What are your thoughts on basically the process overall of strategic planning? So that said, I'll take one quick breath and then we move on. As you can see, I like kind of creating some fancy slides once in a while. This is one I created a long time ago. But in the end, what I was trying to kind of make a point on here is that the strategic plan is the base foundation of every trade. So as we start to see growth, as we start to see branches start to flourish, as we start to see leaves kind of start to come out, it all comes and should come from basically the goals and the priority focus areas within the strategic plan in some way, shape, or form. Again, taking you through these things quickly, strategic plan, then we have directional documents like, again, the budget process, maybe a service master plan, maybe an asset management plan, wherever it might be. Those are basically subsets of your strategic plan, a long-term financial plan, and then we want to identify our priorities. Because here's the thing, one of the realities of municipal government, we have limited resources. Taxation is challenging. And so for us to be strategic, we have to be realistic. We also have to prioritize, because once we make commitments to things, we're going to be on the hot seat a little bit, because again, we have to be good financial stewards, and we're accountable to the public in terms of the money that we spend. I will say this. Again, a couple of examples. One, Strathcona County. Remember that strategic planning process I was talking about, and that those themes that that was written down that day. I'm sure recreation was one of them. And in the year 2000, we actually built and opened up a building called Millennium Place. Millennium Place was a multi-purpose rec facility in the year 2000, which had two soccer fields, two hockey rinks, a running track, a swimming pool, a play area for kids, a leisure skate area, and obviously workout areas. You can tell I work out all the time. I'm kidding, I don't. But um, and that I have to say that basically facility was a big part of strategy because it wasn't just about recreation. It was about attracting residents to our community. It was about making the business community say, this is a community that's actually putting investment back into their community. And that was to me part of the impetus for why Strathcona County became successful, as it looked basically like we were very optimistic about our future. So recreation, by the way, is a huge, huge a growth trigger for residential growth and subsequently business growth. And I've seen many municipalities that have built recreation facilities end up having significant population growth and ultimately business growth because of that recreation kind of pillar. So something you want to consider. Like, I mean, it doesn't have to be recreation; it could be anything else. It could be all kinds of different things that could result in success. But again, just think of it this way: the strategic plan is the foundation of planting seeds for your future. Now, some of my strategic planning musings I'm going to talk about here just for a moment is again, strategic planning, as I mentioned before, it's about influencing the future. A strategic plan is all about not today, it's about what do we want to be tomorrow and what kinds of things do we need to do to get there. Strategic planning, again, is also about aligning our organizational resources, which I mentioned. And so again, without strong financial planning and an accompanying long-term financial plan that ties to the strategic plan, often municipalities will have lukewarm success with their strategic planning because, again, they don't have the resources to make things happen or they don't allocate the resources to the right things. And so, very, very important, as I mentioned already. Again, we have to balance a vision with community and available resources because again resources available should not inhibit the vision, but we have to also be realistic. Sometimes a strat plan, I actually just facilitated a strategic plan session with a municipality called the town of Hanley over the weekend, and beautiful town, excellent council, great administrator. I really had fun doing it. And one of the key things that we talked a lot about was, okay, now that we've done the strat plan, how do we feel about the residents' appetite around tax increases that may be tied to this plan? Um, or do you think they're going to be okay with improvements in recreation? Do you think that they might be okay with improvements in basically business attraction? Maybe some of the money we need spent to for consultants to help us attract business. Do you think that they'll be okay with maybe staff increases to improve our public works services? Those are the kinds of things we talked about. And ultimately, council said we believe that a good communication plan that goes along with the strat plan, I think our residents would accept tax increases if they saw improvements that are tied to this plan. And so I thought that was brilliant by the council and a very, very great show of leadership that they were willing to be strong enough to say to the public that we have a great strat plan, but it might cost a bit if we want to make things happen. And they talked about doing public engagement surveys, all kinds of things. So again, long story short, we want to make sure that we tie long-term financial planning to good strat planning. It's to me an absolute critical component of successful strategic planning. Again, we want to identify the objectives of the strat plan, and we talked about that. And again, the strategic plan must be accompanied by the action plan, which I'm going to show you again a little bit later. I can't stress this part enough, and I'm sorry if I overdo this a little bit, but I've seen so many strategic plans end up going nowhere. And in fact, one municipality I worked with once, when I came in to facilitate their strategic plan, I brought their old one out to start the strategic plan session, and one of the elected officials said, I've never seen this document before. And then they had a bit of a discussion with council. I said, oh, yeah, I remember that was from 4 years ago. I remember the session now. They had not looked at it in 4 years after the session, their strategic plan session had been completed. So the way I looked at it, that's basically absolute failure in relationship to strat planning. And so you must action it. It must tie to your budget process and councils. You got to push your administration a little bit and saying, hey, we got a strategic plan going. What are you going to now do about it to make sure that our strategic plan is enabled and we improve our community? I know many elected officials I've worked with over the almost 30 years that I've been in the business that, quite frankly, should be in what I call the Council Hall of Fame. And the reason why they should be in the Council Hall of Fame is that, they may be long retired now and people forget that they're on council maybe 20, 30, or 30 years ago, but they can be incredibly proud because they were part of a decision that allowed Millennium Place to come, or they're part of a decision that allowed development to happen in the downtown core that brought business into our community that created jobs. Or they maybe were the ones who created a vision about safety that have now allowed us to have a very safe and welcoming community. It's the counselors and their vision that really make things exciting about a municipality. but it's then the administration actions that have to make it happen to for it to come to fruition. So something to consider. Now, the big thing, as again, as elected officials, you want to make sure that you consider when you're looking at great strategic planning is where are we now? I mentioned that before, a bit of a SWOT analysis. What's our current situation? Are we well poised to grow? Are we well poised to be strategic? If not, what do we need to do? We want to know our current state. Then, obviously, where are we going? Where is it we want to be? Where is it what does optimal success look like for us? I consider this all the time for my business. What does optimal success look like? What does optimal success look like for a community? I mean, again, and here's a bit of a trick. This is one that's maybe counterintuitive, but one that I believe in very strongly. The key to great success in municipalities is the art of plagiarism. And all kidding aside, we don't really compete with municipalities, maybe a little bit with the ones in our specific region because of certain reasons. But on the most part, if we look across the country, look across the world even, we're not necessarily competing with municipalities in other regions and or even in other countries. And one of the things that I think is really key and important is doing some research as to what municipalities have succeeded, what municipalities are maybe where we want to be eventually, what municipalities have great policing, what municipalities have great recreation assets, what municipalities are very strong financially. Do your homework and figure out which ones are kind of where we want to be, and then get on the phone. Trust me, I've never worked or called a municipality or a colleague in another municipality and said, I want to kind of pick your brain on something that you guys work on, and they say, no, I have no time for you. You can find examples of municipalities that probably are close to where you want to be in the future. And by learning from their learnings and their mistakes and their successes, you can probably get to a really good place. And so that's a really good example of figuring out where you want to go is looking at other municipalities and determining that. And then obviously where you want to go, you might have public engagement surveys with your public, open houses, I think is a really great thing. And then ultimately, hey, this is why you're paid the big bucks as elected officials. And I know that you're not paid really big bucks. So I apologize basically, because again, I have a massive respect for elected officials and what you do. But the key thing is this, is that as soon as you got elected, the expectation of the public is that you're the ones that are going to, guide where we want to be. I trust you with basically the reins of our community and the future of our community. Now, please show us what you're going to be. That's the expectation. After 4 years, a community wants to see, or residents usually want to see their community going forward and improving. And so that's the really big job of an elected official. And so figuring out where are we going. The next thing you want to question is what's going to get in our way? What are the challenges that we have? Is it finance? Is it lack of knowledge from a staffing perspective? Is it old infrastructure? Is it lack of growth or profile? What are the things that are in our way, and then how are we going to overcome them? So again, you don't want to be shy about this. Talk about your weaknesses. The greatest path to improvement and to success in my mind isn't looking at what we're good at, it's looking at what we're not good at, and then working hard to overcome those things. And I think that's a very important component of strategic planning. Okay, so again, then what do we need to do to get where we want to go? And so, what are the key things? We have to accept this. Maybe we need to hire staff. Maybe we have to have maybe some public engagement surveys. Maybe we need to figure out how to talk with our residents about future tax increases that enable strategy. What are the things we need to do to be successful? Those are, again, the key four things in my mind from a great strategic planning process perspective. And so, again, love to hear your thoughts. Chat functions enabled, Q&A functions enabled. If you want to speak, I could even turn on your microphone. If you're brave enough and you have any comments, please feel free to let me know, and I'll try and answer any questions that you may have during the webinar. Thank you. Moving on. Again, if you haven't taken a Bloom webinar before, by the way, I'm kind of known for really jam-packing a lot of content in my webinars. The reason why is I truly want to provide value to you. So it's a big part of what I do. It's as an educator. And again, you have the PDF. Feel free to go through it and whatnot. And if you want to call me, if you have any questions, feel free. I'm always willing to talk about those things. And so again, the webinar itself and the content, it's a bit of a takeaway. So I've sent it to everybody. Yeah, but you can print it off. You can read through it, write some notes. It should give you a pretty good start to good strategic planning. So anyway, I'll move on now. So again, one of the key things that's great about strategic planning is one of the big challenges that is very prevalent in today's municipal world is disconnect between counselors themselves with each other. We have, what's called rampant dysfunction in municipal government. I have a lot of thoughts on it. And one of the things, and I have to say this, is I get a bit frustrated with the label that gets put on municipalities because, in my opinion, I mean, probably 80%, maybe even more, are very functional and do great things, and the councils work well together, and they're very great from a governance perspective. But it's always the negative stuff that we get to hear in the news. And so I wish sometimes somebody would maybe read a few news stories about the municipalities that are doing really well, because there's so many of them. And I think that's important to know. And on that, one of the things I think is really, really critical and important to consider is that, again, a great strat plan provides alignment. I think I've got a question here, so I'm going to just check here for a second. Q&A. Okay. Yeah, here's a question, anonymous, and I'll keep this anonymous because it should be, because this happens all the time. When I bring up strategic plan with my council, they aren't interested. They don't see the value, no matter how I try to explain to them. How can I encourage them to undertake this process? Number one thing to get them to undertake the process. Here's a couple things. If you have a hard time getting your counselors to undertake strategic planning, here is the number one thing: is this video is going to be recorded. I'm going to upload this to my YouTube video or to my YouTube channel. It's going to be on the website for free. Tell them to just to watch it if they'll take the time to do that. That's one. Because again, hopefully I'm pretty motivating about, the importance of a street plan. The second thing is, if you can, reach out to the municipalities that have gone through strategic planning processes and have been successful, and connect them with your counselor. Sometimes elected officials need to hear from other elected officials about the value of a strategic plan. And there are a lot of elected officials that are out there that'll say the strategic plan changed the game for us. So sometimes not hearing it from administrators, but hearing it from fellow elected officials, to me, is the magic sauce sometimes when it comes down to this. Probably the third thing would be is do your homework as an administrator, and come forward with an information report to council in open session. I think that's where it should be, about the benefits of good strategic planning and why, basically it'll help the municipality. And probably one of the key things on this that I will just mention is that a great strategic plan, in my opinion, will pay for itself many times over. So I think one of the key things that you want to make sure that you let your resident or your councils know is that if you invest in good strategic planning, basically it will have financial benefit. It will have operational benefit. It'll have service level efficiency benefit. It will pay for itself many times over, and I truly believe that. And so that's a long answer. Hopefully that helps. But trust me, you're not alone. I talk with communities all the time about their lack of willingness. I see Ken Van Buell's on. Hey Ken, how's it going? Him and the mayor kicked our butt at golf a few weeks ago, so I'm still pretty frosty about that. But hi Ken, good to see you. If you have any comments, Ken, please feel free to get on. And if you want me to turn on your microphone, I can try and do that as well. So anyway, moving along. Now, strategic planning in the municipal context. Now, one of the beauties of municipal government, again, because I love it so much, is that we have to understand what our product is. And so we have private companies that sell things like iPhones or reading glasses or coffee cups, whatever it might be, and that's their product. So they're developing a product and determining what value people are willing to pay for it, and then they sell those products. We provide a product as well, and the product is a pretty simple one in my mind. It's quality of life for people each and every day. We are in the family business. We are in the business of people. We're in the business of support of people, and all those kind of fun things, right? So I think it's really, really key and important to recognize that the crux of a great strategic plan is really about providing great quality of life for people each and every day. And how do we do that? Through, as you can see on the slide, through services, through infrastructure, through basically the staff that work for municipalities each and every day. Um, um, and then the other side of the coin is, how do we do that? Through taxes, utility rates, fees, and charges. So not unlike Apple, who's selling us an iPhone. I'm not sure if any of you guys have something. It's called a smartphone. Kidding, of course. But again, we're convinced that this has got a lot of value to us. When, to me, the most valuable thing that I pay for, it basically every year is my property taxes, because of all the amazing things I get for it: soccer fields, roads, recreational opportunities, safety, wellness. There's just so much that's in the quality of life quotient for municipalities. It's just off the charts in terms of value. So that said, um, you want to understand basically the beginning of a strategic plan in that the context is about trying to find how are we going to be able to support quality of life for people each and every day in our communities. Now, how do we do those things? We have, again, we have to have an understanding of the fundamentals of what quality of life means for people. And this is a slide I put together many years ago, and you may have heard of the Maclean's magazine rating of livable communities in Canada. They rate the top 100, I think. This is essentially the criteria that they use. And so any strategic planning session should probably have council look at this slide and think about, well, what's important to the people who live here? Housing? Is it access to green space, more parks? Do we want to have a safer community? Health and wellness, economy, basically jobs for maybe myself or my children or our future residents, community pride. What are the things that really resonate with your public? And once you can kind of basically develop what I would call the profile of the citizen of your community that is a representative of the community in the whole, then that helps identify the quality of life quotient and then identify the priorities that you want to chase after as a strategic planning municipality. I think we have a question from Ken, which I'll put up here now. Um, Tim, often strategic plan processes get sidetracked. How do we keep strategic plans strategic and not become taskless? Really great question. Um, so there is an element of task lists involved in strategic planning, Ken. So again, you're going to have task lists that basically are administrative in nature, right? But the one thing that you want to make sure that you do is have basically an understanding as a good administrator that I'm going to look at my task lists, that the things I need to do, and I'm going to ask myself, are they furthering the goals and priorities of our strategic plan? Are we becoming better from a wellness perspective? Are we becoming better from an infrastructure sustainability perspective? Are these tasks becoming and making us better from a governance perspective? And if they're not, then why are we doing them? And so I want to basically question that. The other thing that I can't stress enough is that the problematic issue where strategic plans starting a task list is because we don't do a good job sometimes as administrators at grounding council and letting them know that your job is to be strategic and our job is to be action oriented. And so council starts to get less strategic when we don't focus them on strategy, then they start focusing on task lists. So what I would recommend to any municipality is that once you complete a strategic plan, you should have at least one workshop a year with council, which is a retreat, and you go over your strategic plan and then ground them back up to the strategic level again and make sure that they stay out of the weeds, Ken. That is to me one of the key things. Too often we finish a strategic plan, it gets put up into the shelf. We had a great strategic plan and focused effort on getting council at the right level in terms of the things that we should be looking at. And then throughout the year, and maybe the 4 years of the term, we do nothing but, again, as you mentioned, task lists. And that's when we become very unstrategic. I really do believe you have to keep the strategic planning process going through workshops, retreats, even discussions in open council meetings, and maybe even in committee in private council meetings. You have to kind of keep a strategic kind of emphasis on things, and so hopefully that helps. Chat function. We see some strat plans include ratepayers and some that do not. What are your thoughts on this? When you say include ratepayers, I'm not quite sure what you mean exactly, but I'll say this. Maybe you mean participation. If you have a council that, in my opinion, isn't overly connected with your public, and it happens sometimes, then you need to probably do a bit of public engagement work. Or if the community is a community where maybe you have, I'd call a fractured relationship with your public, there's lots of complaints. If that's the case, then I highly recommend before you go into a strat planning exercise that you do some survey work, some open houses, some workshops. You connect with your public and at least allow them to state their issues and what their problems are. If you don't do that and you complete the strategic plan and you're disconnected with your public and your council disconnect with the public, you do risk being accused of going off in directions that the public don't agree with. So if the relationship is fractured a bit, then you must do some engagement before you do the strat plan. If you have a great relationship with the public and your public really trusts your council, your relationship with council is really good between administrative and council. Sometimes you can just or you should have the premise that the public trusts us. The public trusts our elected officials to move forward. So we have to have less engagement because, again, in a sense, the public already feel that they're being listened to because we have a good council that has already done the engagement work. And so, again, hopefully that answers the question. Two streams. If you have a fractured issue-based challenge with your public, do some surveys, invite them in. And if you don't, and the public trusts your council, just move forward with strat planning. You'll be completely fine. So hopefully that answers the question. So again, great that we're having some questions today. I appreciate it. So anyway, here's that livable community index I put forward for you. Again, if you're going to do a strat plan session, put this on the wall. Basically, with council, send it out before the session. Make sure that they understand and can think about what does our public value? What is the DNA of the average residents of our community? And again, are they representative of the community on the whole? If they are, then they can be discussed in our strat plan. Um, I'll segue into one really quick thing on that. If they aren't representative of the public on the whole, it doesn't mean that sometimes there's going to be things in a strat plan that are focused on a certain community group or a certain sector of our community. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, the beauty of the municipal equation in terms of quality of life is that we're basically contributing our community contribution. That's why I look at taxes to help our neighbors, to help our community overall. I may not use recreation. Maybe I don't use the bus. Maybe I don't drive a car and I don't use the roads. So, when I'm looking at basically strategic planning, I have to recognize that there are going to be elements of a strat plan that focus on certain sectors of our public and some that it doesn't focus on. And you have to be brave enough and have the intestinal fortitude to move forward regardless of that, even though you might get some complaints on occasion. So, very important concept. I think that needs to be considered when you're strat planning. You can't be everything to everybody. Okay. Strategy, again, this is kind of more buzzword stuff in relationship to, and again, I put this slide together many years ago when I was doing budgets. But again, just some more information they might want to share with council in a strat plan session. What are the things that provides value? What are the things that they think are important? What are the key things that we're trying to do from a strategic planning perspective? And so again, more things like this that you can get in front of council's eyes before a strat plan session starts to get them to the right level of strategy. I did work with the community once, and I have to say, it was kind of a frustrating strat plan session because I was trying to get them focused on party focus areas, and what they really want to talk about was ripping open the garbage bags to see if people were recycling properly. I like literally this council wanted to have a 45-minute conversation on basically stuff. Where are we going to put the trails? Where are we going to put the new road? They want to talk about what equipment they were going to buy. And I kept trying to tell them that's not strategic in nature. And in the end, we kind of got to a good place. But again, you want to make sure through this type of information, you get your council to recognize that they're too important to be in the weeds. That strategic planning process is really about the future, and the best again value that we can get from our elected officials is what is it that you want us to actually achieve as an organization from a high strategic level, not from a what kind of car do you want us to buy, Ford or Chevy. So it's just this information basically sets the groundwork for again getting council into the right frame of mind. Okay. Now I talked a little bit before about kind of like your current state, the things that you need to think about, and here is a framework that I created many years ago. When I worked at Strathcona County and I was the budget guy, I would sit and I'd look at the budget, basically submissions when people sent in their information. And it started to hit me when I looked at the recreation financial plan and the police financial plan and the planning development financial plan. Well, what are the things that are causing us issues? And then when I looked at the strat plan, I was like, well, what are the barriers for us to achieve what we want? And what are the things that enable us? And so I put together basically a framework for questioning the things that were important and not important, and basically what our strengths and weaknesses were for municipality. And so I go through this with every municipality that I do a strategic plan on. I go through each one of the areas, and we talk about them in relationship to what's our population changes. Are we growing? Are we shrinking? Is our demographics changing? Are we becoming younger? Are we becoming older? What's our opportunities? What's our vulnerable sector of our population? Really important. I talk about capital growth and maintenance. Are we a well-maintained municipality? Do we have pressures needing maybe a new fire hall? Do we need maybe a new rec facility? What are those pressures? Social needs and issues. Do we have issues with homelessness in our community? Do we have massive issues with addictions or crime in our community? And so using a framework for developing kind of like your current state to me is absolutely critical. You want to have something that's structured, something that can kind of get you grounded and focused on the things that matter. And so I think this framework is really good. Now, hint, hint, And you're welcome. I provided you with my actual slide deck that I use when I work with councils at the end of the PDF to kind of help you if you want to kind of go through a SWOT analysis and a Bloom scan yourself. Or you can call me and I can help you do it. And so that's one of the things that, again, a little bit of a plug for me. But I can't stress enough, using something like this can really strengthen your the beginning section of your strategic planning, because knowing where you're at, what your risks are, what your opportunities are, to me is the origins of what your strategic plan process should begin with. So something to consider. Love to hear your thoughts on this, by the way. Strategic plan challenges, again, this is the biggest thing. It's all about leadership. You want to make sure that you focus council on that they are the leaders of the community, the leaders of the organization through the CAO, and the strategic plan is intended to be a leadership document. But we also want to recognize that we do have challenges. And one of the key challenges of good strategic planning is that we are very diverse as municipalities. Sometimes we have what's called silos of municipalities, and cultural differences within a municipality cannot be underestimated. And what I mean by that is that a police officer has very different goals for their area than a land use planner. A land use planner has very different goals and objectives than a recreation director. A recreation director has very different goals and objectives than the finance department. And so, because departments within a municipality all contribute to the quality of life for people in different ways, sometimes we end up with competition. Sometimes we end up with challenges from a priority perspective. Sometimes we have challenges from a resource perspective. And so, recognizing that in your strat plan is key to success. Because one of the realities of good strategic planning is this, is that strategic planning is also about decision making. And sometimes those decisions will make some people happy, and sometimes those decisions will make other people quite sad, because some people will get their staff, they'll get their projects, they'll get maybe new financial resources because they become a priority from a council perspective in terms of strategic planning, and some departments become not a priority from a resource perspective. And so you have to recognize, especially when the CAO is in the room working with council on the strategic plan, that it is going to result sometimes in shifts in resource allocations, and it's going to mean some people get things and some don't. That is the reality of strategic planning, but it's a must have in relationship to recognizing good decision making around strat planning as well. So this is just a slide that kind of explains the detail behind the different departments and that. So I won't go over this because I've already explained it, but good takeaway if you want to kind of put something in front of your staff in terms of the outfacing services versus the internal. So now I'm going to move into the processes. We're on the downhill now. We have a strategic plan. So basically, again, when we look at overall processes that we have in municipality, we have basically creating visions, we have enabling the vision, we have actioning the vision, and basically those things come into process. We have the strategic plan, and then we have basically maybe business plans for different departments, and we have the action plan that needs to be created by the administration. That then ties into what I think is, again, this maybe the second most important process in municipal government is the budget process. And why is the budget process so important when it comes to strat planning? Is the strat plan is, again, nothing more than a bookshelf item with nice shiny ink on it and some really great wording, until somebody says we're going to put new staff towards this, or we're going to focus a consultant on some work related to our strat plan, or we're going to invest in a new grader or some new infrastructure to support some of our strategic goals. The budget process has to be completely linked with the strategic plan process. And you've got to make sure council recognizes that they shouldn't be in the weeds, but you want to make sure that when you bring forward a budget as an administrator, that you can say we are enabling your strategic plan through this year's budget. And that was something that I did as a chief administrative officer, and it's certainly something that I did as a finance manager. Is I worked very hard on making sure that I could start off my budget deliberations with council saying that this budget is basically enabling your strategic plan through actions, through resource allocation, through the things that we're going to do to make your vision become a reality. And if you look at budgets over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and they're really strongly linked to the strategic plan, the reality of meeting the goals of council and maybe attaining their vision for the community in the future goes up exponentially, because you're actually taking action, you're doing things. And so this is really important to understand. You have to make sure that you tie in the processes together. Again, the first thing is to initiate the strategic planning process. And again, and I really empathize with the issue that you have, or sympathize with it. Basically, some councils don't think this is important when it's probably the most important thing that they can do. One of the things that I often use as a terminology is if you don't strategic plan, basically you're just a rinse and repeat, basically municipality. You just take put the gravel on the road, you cut the grass, you open up the recreation facility, you just do the same things you did last year, and you never improve or get better. Strategic planning changes the game on that, and so that would maybe be a bit of a thing that you might want to share with your council in terms of motivating them that you need to do these things. The second thing is you want to prepare a mission statement. So, what's the mission of our municipality? What are the things that we are trying to actually achieve? And then you want to assess again your environmental factors. And so, what are the things that are challenging us? What are the things that are important? What's the things that are not important? What's our current state? What are the things that we have to focus on to become better? So, again, assess your environmental factors as again, municipality, and definitely when you're developing your strategic plan. The fourth thing is identify critical information. So again, let's identify basically the most critical issues. What are the things that are really challenging us? Do we have a lack of growth? Do we have financial challenges? Do we have infrastructure issues? Do we have safety concerns in our community? What are the key things that we want to identify as a requirement for information? And also, what information do we need? Maybe we need to have information on our capabilities. Do we have the right staff in place? Do we have access to the right types of consultants to be able to achieve our goals? What are the things that we need from that actioning perspective to basically make sure our strategic plan is successful? So, want to maybe think about that a little bit. And then finally, and this is the fun stuff, and I mentioned this before, the way that I facilitate that, we want to agree on some broad priority themes: economics, recreation, good governance, service excellence, which is one that I really like having in strategic plans. What are the things that are really critical to our community, and what are the things that we as council want to focus our administration on? And again, maybe be kind of a change agent for our community, so that maybe we become safer. We get more business come to our community, whatever it might be. We want to make sure that we agree on 5 or 6 key priority objectives and themes. We then want to talk about objectives. And Ken, this is maybe where you talk about, the worry of a strategic plan turning into a list. You need to be careful. It's not just basically stuff, but it's really truly worded in a way that is still strategic in nature. So, what are the objectives of our theme? And so, again, if we say economic development, one of the broad objectives is going to be becoming a place where we become an employment center. So, kids don't need to move away to get a job. They can actually, grow up in our community and get jobs in our community. Maybe safer community might be something around an objective is to facilitate, basically better community connections. And so we help each other from a crime perspective, or we become more connected from that perspective. And so again, key objectives need to be part of your strategic plan, but they still need to be strategic in nature and just not simply a list of actions. Because again, that's the administrator's job to kind of take care of that part. And so you want to make sure you can identify here's the things that we want to have happen under our key priority themes. Once those things are done, then we're going to start developing basically strategies to achieve those broad goals. And so again, what are the things that we need to do, internal and external, basically for the specific areas? And so again, economy might be getting the right expertise in. It might be reaching out to our business community and developing a chamber of commerce. It might be doing basically we're open for business bazaar, where we can actually say to businesses that are looking to locate in places, this is a really interesting place to be. I'm working right now with a town called the town of Dundurn and now the town of Hanley. They're like right beside each other in the Saskatoon region. And the key thing is that when you do a study of the Saskatoon region, it's actually been identified as probably, I think, the second most greatest potential area for economic growth in the entire country. Because in Saskatchewan, they discovered that potash has become a big deal for fertilizer. It's the largest uranium mine in the entire world is in Saskatchewan, and they discovered heavy oil, just like in Alberta, but it's a lot deeper. So they're trying to figure out how to get to it right now. And so, because of those 3 big natural resource opportunities that they have, between the Regina Saskatoon area has been identified as probably one of the greatest potential growth areas in the entire country over the next 30 years. And so, identifying what types of things we need to do from a strategic perspective to take advantage of that is something that that committee is working on right now. I was asked to come to do an intermunicipal, facilitated intermunicipal cooperation workshop with councils about 3 weeks ago in the Dundurn area, and I just the strategic plan for the town of Hanley over the weekend. And again, so those are two communities that, in my mind, are really looking at doing the right things to take advantage of the opportunities that have been identified. Because if you don't, I can guarantee you that there will be communities that are in that region that get left behind, that don't grow. And so it's one of those things that you want to be proactive in. And again, you want to start thinking about sub strategies under your priorities. Very, very important to know. And again, there's a great example of priority themes, economic development, and they're starting to work on intermunicipal governance or intermunicipal relationships. They're working at developer attraction. They're working on a lot of things to basically take advantage of the potential that they have in their region now. The seventh thing that you want to do again is create an action plan. And again, I stress this, I can't stress this enough that you need to have basically actions identified to take for a strat plan to actually become successful. This is administrative actions, very, very important. You want to make sure that you develop measurable objectives. What are the kinds of things that we want to measure so that we can actually verify that we actually succeeded? How's our community become safer? Have we attracted some business to our community? Have we become better as a council in terms of the way that we work through the democratic process? If governance is one of our priorities, we want to make sure that we measure things so that we can say, are we improving? If we don't measure, typically things don't improve. So you want to make sure you take a look at the measurements that are tied to your strategic goals. Okay. And again, that ties to the measurable objectives and then incorporating performance measures again, which I just talked about. So moving on to the next things. Again, eventually we want to get approval of our strategic plan. So that'll be the next thing that happens with council is again, we want to formally approve it. And then here's a key aspect of approval is that we want to share it. We want to make sure that the strategic plan gets communicated to our public, gets communicated to our staff, gets well understood from even an intermunicipal relationship perspective. And so maybe the region gets to understand what we want to achieve strategically. Communication is absolutely critical when it comes down to the strategic planning process. And I can't stress this enough, especially with your public. Strategic planning processes, if done right, should be something that is kind of an exciting process. It's one that's very optimistic. It gets the public excited. So it's something that you definitely need to have a good, strong, and strategic approach to in relationship with communication. Here's a little bit of a hint, though. I'm going to just maybe mention one thing that I have found that's really important to note when you're looking at strategic plans is you want to ensure that you have quick wins in your strat plan. Because again, when it becomes a public facing document and you create expectations in the public, they expect to see results. They expect to see results from their investment. If you've invested again some money in having a consultant come in and do a strat plan, they want to see some benefits of the strat plan. And so you want to have some quick wins. And that can be an improvement in community beautification, can be an improvement in your governance, or maybe the way that you communicate with your public. Maybe it's a monthly newsletter from council, and we talked about that in Hanley over the weekend. Maybe it's an improvement or small improvements to infrastructure, the way that you cut grass. You want to basically be able to blow your horn about the things that we're doing today and the things that the strat plan is actually achieving. And so look for quick wins and make sure you connect with your public after a strategic plan is complete. Then basically you want to implement the plan. This is like you have your action plans. Well, now we're going to do things. We're actually going to take action. Things have been budgeted. We've got a new staff member maybe, or we've been invested in a plan, or we've invested in maybe supplies, materials, new fuel for grass cutting, wherever it is, because we're going to cut the grass more. Whatever it might be, we want to make sure that we can implement and again measure, and then finally monitor our programs, which is reporting. I'm going to show you an example of a strat plan here right away, but one of the things that I think, and I really appreciated this, I have one client, Town of Bonnyville. I'm going to show you their strat plan. One thing that they did, and I thought it was brilliant, and again, it really worked out for them, is they completed the strategic plan. They then completed the action plan that I talked about, and then they actually built it into the reporting process. So they would at least once a year, sometimes more, go back to council with basically their report on the actions taken and the progress of the strategic plan itself. And I can still remember getting a call from Renee, who was the finance person in the town of Bonneville, and Bill, who was the former CEO, who's now, by the way, getting involved with Bloom. Thanks, Bill, for all the help you're about to give me. And they were excited about saying, you know what, we just finished the strat plan process, we finished the action plan process, and after 4 years, we completed over 90% of the actions that we identified in our action plan, and we're able to clearly illustrate that we're actually making progress on our strategic goals and priorities. And council is absolutely thrilled with that report because, again, now it can become public. And so that is where a really good strategic planning process comes together. Identifying of this identification of strategy, identification of actions, putting budget towards those actions, and then doing and then reporting. That is to me the real juice of great strategic planning, and it really shows that strategic plans are successful. So again, and then maybe once every 4 years, in my opinion, unless something really impactful happens, you want to make sure that you reassess your strategic plan. At least probably you want to take a look at it at least once a year. As I mentioned, you want to have a council workshop, and then every 4 years reassess it and make sure that it's still valid and useful. Okay. Now, some examples, and again, we're coming now to the end, and so I'm gonna just go through this really quickly, and then we'll finish off if anybody has any questions. Here's the examples that I did of the strategic plan again in the town of Bonneville. And this is actually one I did a long time ago. As you can see, this was like probably in 2019 I did this, and it's now it was for 2020 to 2024. But we did two things. So we created the strat plan, and so here's the core values that they had identified. Here's the information that came from the municipal scan that I talked about before in terms of like what are their challenges and maybe some opportunities. And then I'm going to say one thing too on this. What I learned over the last number of years is when I do the municipal scan, I kind of filter out the negativity and I really kind of focus more on the positive things of the scan. And so I think that's important because again, you want the strategic plan itself to be kind of an enabling and motivating document. So that's it. We then identified priority focus areas. This is what the work that council came up with. They came up with, again, 7 key focus areas, and I thought these were very important. And then they moved into, again, this is what a priority focus area would look like in the plan. So if I'm looking at economic sustainability as one of the priority focus areas of council, here is the goal statement. We support economic sustainability through partnerships with local business, focusing on tourism and actions to diversify the local economy. And so again, a really good and strong goal statement. And then what are our objectives? We will explore the health industry possibilities. We will focus on business growth and attracting new business to our community. We will embrace the oil and gas sector while exploring opportunities to diversify the local economy. So a lot of broad objectives that are still strategic in nature, but are not necessarily a list of action. And then what I then cut out from their actual action plan was this is the actual action plan they came up with. And so here is the medical health hub. Explore possibilities of a health hub being developed. Say, council, unknown from a budget perspective in terms of time frame. That's okay to put in if it was unknown at the time. I think they firmed this up later, but there was action taken. Regional economic development strategy, focus on regional and local economic growth and opportunities. And again, development of the strategy. I know that they hired a consultant for this. Tourism strategy, develop a plan to support tourism activities. I know that they actually hired, again, a consultant that came in and developed basically a tourism strategy. And so what you're seeing here is, the information going from basically the initial process to here's our focus areas to here's our objectives to here's our action items that eventually became part of their budget process and they're reported on. And so that basically is the process. And again, pretty intensive process, but I mean, can imagine when the town of Bonneville went through each one of these priority focus areas and developed a full action plan on each one of the priority focus areas that tied to the objectives that are in the plan of council. Do you think that they actually maybe bettered their community? They absolutely did, right? From a plan perspective. I mean, Bonneville is doing very well, as a town now from in many respects, especially in these ones here. So again, absolute success in their strategic plan process and something I think that they should be very proud of. Done. I finished and I finished on time. So I'm actually quite happy with this. And so I'm going to stop now and ask, does anybody have any questions specific to the work that, or the things that I've just talked about? Oh, we got Q&A. Tim, often strategic plan processes get sidetracked. No, that's already. Okay, here's another one. I work for a rural municipality at the cusp of oil development. I this is one that I'm very, very versed in because I worked in a place like this as well. The plant is to be operational by year end. I believe we're in an optimal position to further develop. Learning from other municipalities with oil development, a strat plan is vital, I believe. I agree. Also to assist with us with asset management plan, our road infrastructure will be heavily impacted. However, overall, as a small office suggestions. Here's the thing. Um, I worked in a municipality called Strathcona County, as I've mentioned, which is a municipality of 100,000 people and well over 1,000 employees. I was also the chief administrative officer of the town of Riverheim for a few years, and so a town of maybe about 1,300 to 1,500 people. And one of the key things when you're looking at a situation like you are, where you're about to maybe be enabled to take advantage of a really exciting opportunity that you have a big plant beside you, you have to look at the opportunities from a revenue perspective in terms of new assessment, maybe even sponsorship from that business, and talk to your council about we need to invest in ourselves if we're going to actually grow. And so the key thing, if you're a small office, is to probably farm out things to consultants or other or individuals that can help support you in these endeavors. And but the key thing is probably beginning with a strategic plan to kind of flush out where's our risk areas, where's our areas of need from maybe even a staffing perspective, if we need to even increase staff, and then ultimately what are we going to try to achieve in relationship to taking advantage of this great opportunity we have because we have industry opening up beside us. Those are probably the beginning things that you'll want to look at in terms of the origins. And then again, you have to work with your council, sit down with them and say, what are we willing to invest in? Are we willing to put actual resources and budgetary resources towards taking advantage and becoming successful with this current situation that we have? And so that would be my recommendation. It would be sit down, try to ask council if they'd be willing to invest in a strategic planning session, and then maybe even an assessment of our current state and where we want to be, and then how do we actually allocate resources. If you don't do that, again, asking council for more staff, asking council to get consultants to help support you, it's impossible because you don't have that base framework document, which is the strategic plan, to say, well, this is what you want and what you said is important. If we're going to do that, then you have to give me the resources to be able to succeed. So long-winded answer. I know if you want to call me offline, we can talk about this. But again, it really just comes down to telling council that we need help and support. I really do believe that. Any other questions? Any other questions on the information that I've shared? Um, Again, as I mentioned before, just in case, just waiting for questions if any come up, I did put in my slide deck for facilitating at least the SWOT analysis, and a few other slides just for interest, basically if you're interested in anything else. And so looking for additional questions if there's anything. Maybe while some of you are typing or thinking about questions, I am going to mention Bloom is looking at its curriculum for next year. If you're interested in supporting me with some thoughts around a new curriculum, that would be fantastic. We are again an online education company. If you look online, or you could reach out to me, our All Access Pass is highly popular. I have over 130 courses online for finance staff, CAOs, elected officials, leaders that you can access, at your convenience or even on your phone if you want to watch the courses. It really helps, and it's very, very economical. Fantastic top-notch training, in my opinion, incredibly highly rated by our users, and again, a very, very economical way of getting in some good training and professional development if you're interested in that. I am going to be coming out with, just for awareness for elected officials, a full council orientation, online orientation here. I'm working on it now. That will be available here shortly, that you can sign up for and do your full council orientation online if you want. Again, under All Access Pass, or you can just pay a fee for just having that access to that program. And so something else that we are going to be providing. Any questions or comments or anything? Feel free to type things in if you want. I'll just keep going until we're done. A few minutes left still. I also do in-person courses. If anybody wants me to come to your region or present a course for your municipality, absolutely can do that. I just, as I mentioned before, just finished at City of Edmonton, where I did some courses for some regional municipalities in Edmonton. I went to the city of Coquitlam in BC, beautiful place, had a fantastic experience delivering a course there. And more recently, just did a course at the Arm of Cornwall Park in the Saskatoon region for a number of municipalities on leadership. Now it's just yesterday and the day before, so had a long drive back. So if you have any interested in Bloom support, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd love to connect with you. Another way of connecting with Bloom and with myself is LinkedIn. If you are on LinkedIn, please look on and connect with me. Always willing to share information on LinkedIn and again, get into conversations about your current state. And so, not seeing anything else from a question perspective and nothing in the chat. I'm just going to say going once, going twice, going three times. Nothing else. Thanks, everybody. I really do appreciate your time that you took for today's webinar. Hopefully, you found it valuable, and hopefully, it will really help you on your journey to creating a great strategic plan and ultimately a great municipality. So, again, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you at the next Bloom webinar. And again, never hesitate to reach out. Oh, got a few chats. Oh, some thank yous. Thanks so much. Really appreciate the thank yous. Thanks so much for attending today. And again, if anyone wants to talk, phone calls are free. I love talking to people. So if you have any questions about your strategic planning situation, don't hesitate to give me a call. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for all the kind words and have a fantastic day. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.